This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, producing.
Welcome to the American Theater Wing Seminars on Working in the Theater. These seminars are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, located on 42nd Street in the heart of Times Square. This is where off-Broadway and on-Broadway meet, in the heart of the theater district. When people think of the American Theater Wing, they automatically think of the Tony Awards. But the Wing is more than that. The Wing is its Saturday Theater for Children program. This brings live professional theater into schools on Saturday mornings. And children line up, they buy a ticket, they make a commitment to go to the theater. This is the way theater has to be, a lifetime experience, not just having the one big gala thing. And we hope that by doing this, we are providing the audience for the future. We also have our hospital program. This is bringing plays and entertainment into hospitals to those people who can't get out. We bring them the magic and the excitement of theater. Then there are the seminars, one more program of the Wings. And this is a most important and a very exciting one. It comes out of the Wings School, where for many years people came and they re-honed their tool, their trade of being in the theater. And people like Dick Rogers and Oscar Hammerstein and Harold Prince and Kermit Bloomgarden taught what it was to work in the theater. And what we are doing year-round is bringing these programs together and to continue the tradition of being part of the theater and being part of a community of theater so that we service the community through the theater. You've been listening to the seminars on the performance and on the playwright and the director. And today, the seminar is on the production. This is what brings it all together. These are the people that make it all possible for that magic of theater to happen on the stage. Our co-moderators today are Jean Dalrymple, who is a wonderful producer, director, and actress, founding member of the Board of Directors of the American Theater Wing, and president of the Light Opera Company of Manhattan. Edwin Wilson, who is theater critic for the Wall Street Journal, is with us today, and he's here not as a critic, but because he just loves the theater. Thank you very much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over immediately to our co-moderators, who will introduce the production staff of Burn This.
Thank you, Isabel. I'd like to begin by introducing the person without whom there would be no production whatsoever, the author of the play we're talking about, Burn This, on my far right, Lanford Wilson. Mr. Wilson that applause is much deserved. He's not only one of our most prolific playwrights, he has been described very recently by perhaps our toughest critic as our most important playwright. John Simon, I think, used those words just last week. And I think he's written such an important body of work, beginning with the plays such as Balm in Gilead and Hot Ale Baltimore that were done many years ago at the Circle Repertory Company, Then he went into a phase where he did his tally cycle of plays, and I'm very pleased to say that I was serving on the Pulitzer Drama Committee when we awarded the Pulitzer Prize to Mr. Wilson for Tally's Folly. And now he's returned and Burn This to the urban New York scene with the play that we're going to be talking about today, Burn This. Next, on my immediate right, one of the producers of Burn This, Max Weitzenhoffer, who has been involved both off-Broadway and on-Broadway in productions. He was involved in things like Equus and the Elephant Man many years ago, but he's more recently been involved in The Blood Knot by Athol Fugard, a co-producer of Song and Dance, and it plans to co-produce another Athol Fugard play in the near future. And of course, as I say, he's one of the co-producers of Burn This. Jean?
Well, on my far left is an old friend of mine and a wonderful press agent. And a press agent is a very important element in a production, and she's the press agent for Burn This. She's also head of her own organization, Shirley Herz and Associates, and another one of her great hits right now is La Cage aux Folles. She's also done many, many big hits off-Broadway, and I guess altogether she must have represented over 100 big shows, and I've known her for many years, and she's a darling, Shirley Herz. Next to her is the director of Burn This, and has been the director of heaven knows how many wonderful shows, especially when he was running the Circle Rep. He had 6 or 7 plays on every season, and all perfectly wonderful. And I've been an admirer of his for many, many years. Marshall Mason. And then the co-producer of Burn This, James B. Freydberg, and I'm very glad to make his acquaintance. He's also produced other big hits, Song and Dance, Blood Knot, we talked about that yesterday, Master Harold and the Boys, and he's going to do another of Athol Fugard's plays soon, The Road to Mecca. Mr. Freydberg.
That's good. you're very theatrical. That's good. We are today going to look at the anatomy of a production, how a production comes about, how it finally gets to that point where it opens on, in this case, on Broadway. And we're going to talk about the way in which the aesthetic, the artistic side, joins together with the commercial side, with the business side, to make the production come about. We're going to get into that in some detail in just a moment, but just to get started, and just so you can meet all of the people who are on this panel today, I'd like to start with one question to ask each one of them, namely exactly where in the chain of this process they got involved and where their first involvement was. And as I said earlier, the person with whom it all begins is the playwright, and he has a terrible cold, and we are grateful to him for being here despite that. But what I really want to ask Lanford is exactly, in your case, where you first began working on this in your own mind in terms of the idea and perhaps beginning the writing process on this particular play.
Right. I'll try to get it right this time. I've lied to so many interviewers. I think it started when I was driving back from Sag Harbor to New York with Jim Hawkins, who's a neighbor out there, and I was talking to him, and I had some sort of experience that I was talking about, and I can't remember what it was. And he said, "Oh God, that reminds me of a time when," and told me about a roommate of his who had died, and he had to go to the funeral and make, since the guy was gay, he had to make up all kinds of lies for the family, who obviously had no idea that the guy was gay, and got dragged off with the brother who only drank brandy all night and got taken to every bar in in Providence, Rhode Island. And while he was telling me that, I drifted off and into my mind, making him a woman and the guy coming, and I paired it all up very differently. And that's really when I thought of the story, driving back, and had the story pretty clearly in mind by the time I got back to New York. There were two people I wanted to work with. One, the guy was obviously perfect for Pale, and the girl I called up and I said, "What would you like to do?" And she said, "I used to dance a great deal, and I've never played a dancer, and I would love to be a dancer." I said, "What fun! I love dance, and know something about it. That'd be great." So that was the genesis of the play. Then I worked with these two people later, about a month later, and discovered they're the most difficult people I've ever worked with in my life, and knew that I didn't want anything to do with them ever again. And so I forgot the idea completely. And 4 years later was working on two things that weren't going anywhere, and was in the middle of an anxiety attack, which I've told any number of people by now. I mean, having an anxiety attack about my anxiety attack. And said I could not work at all, and I was very worried that neither of these ideas was going anywhere, and I hadn't written anything in 3 years, and I worked myself up into a frenzy, and couldn't work at the office, couldn't work at home. So leaving the office and going home, I said, well, at least, since this is an anxiety attack and you're trembling all over and your shoulders feel like concrete, write that down so you get the symptoms of an anxiety attack. And you may need it one day. And so I got home and could barely type, and I started, in very simple sentences, writing what I felt like, my physical symptoms. And within about 5 minutes, it had turned into a character who was ranting and railing about everything under the sun. I wrote 2 whole pages and said, "What in the hell is that?" And I said, "Oh, that's Pale from 4 years ago." And then the play was written within 3 months, which is very, very quick.
That is, absolutely. That's fascinating, I must say. Absolutely fascinating.
So that's the genesis of that.
It's absolutely fascinating. Now, well, I want to turn to Marshall and ask him, when you first came into the picture, did you know anything about that work that had been done 3 or 4 years previously, or when did you first see it, and in what form did you first see it?
Oh, writers are so colorful. I really don't remember exactly how I came in touch with it the first time, but we had received a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts at Circle Rep. And Lance refers to the office, that's what he's talking about. I had an office there as the artistic director, and his office was right outside mine. And that's where he spends a great deal of time working. And we had received a grant from the endowment for the purpose of strengthening the ensemble. And one of the goals that I had as an artistic director in setting up the ensemble was that we would commission plays by authors specifically written for our company to perform. And so Lanford had begun writing on this play. I think we were doing, my first memory of it is when we were doing Tally and Son up at Saratoga. Circle Rep every summer for 5 years went up to Saratoga Springs as a summer home, and we did productions up there, often in repertory. And we were doing a revival of Lanford's play Tally and Son, which had been through a great many revisions. And I remember Lanford saying, sort of to the effect of, "I think my block has stopped because I've been writing this thing, and I'm writing burn this on every page because I don't feel like I've been reaching deep enough." And I said, "Well, that's an interesting concept." And when we, as he began writing, and he read me, I think, a speech or two, and I said, being familiar with how Lanford works, often it will start as one character talking, and you wonder if that character is ever going to shut up. And when that character does shut up, someone will undoubtedly start answering him, and then you begin to have a play. It turns into a scene. That's right. And that was just beginning to happen at the point that I first came in touch with the play. And I think I said right away, you have to call it that, because that's such a arresting title. If that's what it's going to be, actually call it that. It was sort of his working title. But he didn't.
It was never a title for me at all.
We insist.
Admonishment.
It was your title.
Yeah, it was actually Marshall's title and Tanya's title.
Well, he was writing "Burn This" on the page, so it looked like a title, So.
Was it a completed script, or
no.
scenes? No, it was just scenes.
Little speeches, little fragments of things.
But I didn't really. I didn't begin to work in any kind of way on the play at all. That was in August of '85. Is that possible?
Yeah.
86? 86. August of
85.
85. No, it is 85. And that fall, when we had our National Endowment Grant, we went as a company to Dorset, Vermont. And up there, we were in retreat. And while we were there, Lanford was writing away on this play. And we were working on Caligula and the Mound Builders and Quiet in the Land. We were going to do those three in repertory. And we had our three new playwrights that were Lanford Wilson, John Bishop, who was working on Musical Comedy Murders. Lanford was working on Burn This. And Patrick Myers was working on a new play, which is still not finished. And we would have a couple of sessions a week in which our actors would read scenes. And Lanford had, by that point, got to where there were actually some scenes.
There was a first act.
Yeah.
Yesterday we were talking about great collaborations between playwrights and directors, and this is certainly one of the most famous and one of the greatest. It's been going on now for how many years?
22 years.
22 years. Isn't that remarkable when you think
really need to
of
ask
the...
It is. I want to come back to that. You're quite right. It is an extraordinary collaboration, and I want to come back to the process that you were just describing, because I think it's absolutely fascinating. But just for the moment, so we get a slight overview here before we go into detail, I'd like to know, Jim, did you or Max, where did you come into the picture? Where did you first encounter it?
I'm the first person to ever have played every role in the play, because I do not go to readings, and when I was told about the play from Lanford, and I was on the board of Circle Rep, I read the play. In the first reading, I read a play so I can see what the roles are, and the second reading, I actually play every role in the play. I actually present the play in my mind. I come up with a set, I come up with exactly what I think it could be, and I do the play. And that's how I know whether it's going to play or not.
Do you mean out loud in your living room?
No, in my mind.
I read
it. The third time I read it is to see what I think its ability of saleability might be, which is the producer end of me, which goes another end. So I've actually played all the roles. And I might add, they all kind of turned out the way I kind of hoped. When I read it, it was after I had heard something about it when I went up to see Talley and Sons up in Saratoga that time. And it was a very short time after that, maybe 3 or 4 months, that I actually read it, and then I played it a week later, and got a standing ovation on the first time that I actually played all the roles.
You're the audience as well.
Yes, I'm the audience. I'm everything. And then my partner Max and I have always, in the last quite a few years now, we're a collaborative team, like these two gentlemen. I then said to Max, "You've got to read this play. This is an extraordinary piece of work." And actually, on the first playing of a play, only twice have I ever, on the first playing of my playing the play, have I ever said, "This is it." The other was Master Harold. And then it went to Max.
Well, yes, no, I was just going to ask when you got the script, what do you do when you get a script, and what did you do in this case?
Normally when I get a script, I read it and think to myself, oh my God, what is this about? But because I must say, I'm in a way I'm like Jim, that I read it and I try to play all the parts, but I'm not that successful because my audience often tells me, that they're not. But, I look at a play and I read it and ask myself if it's something that I really like what it's saying. I don't have the ability, to be honest with you, of reading a script and really thinking about how it's going to play. I only can read a script and say, I love what this is about, and it's very difficult then to know. My experience has always been it never plays like, in my imagination, that it plays like. And and Jim and I have always had, we've always had the philosophy of being very committed to creative people, rather than doing projects that come to us, and we're much more interested in having Lanford and Athol and people like, and being committed to producing their work. And when I read the play, it was a wonderful play, and we wanted to do it.
I should add that the two of us had been discussing, we primarily don't produce plays, we produce writers. And we had been discussing Lanford for quite a while. And in fact, I had said to Max I'd like to go on the board of Circle Rep because of Marshall's involvement and Lanford's, and I wanted to get to know them. And my commitment to doing new plays and theirs, I felt that there was something that was that really would work. And so when this play came up, it was not just a commitment to this play for us. It was a commitment in the future of saying, we want a body of work, and this man has a body of work, all of which we have felt very strongly about. And we would hope that in our first experience, it might lead to future experiences. So it's that kind of situation. In fact, I'm looking in the audience today, and there's somebody who's been doing a body of work with us of Athol Fugard's, and it's Lucille Ortel, and who's here. And we also do that with producing. We bring in people with us who are committed to that body of work. Lucille's committed to certain authors, and we have a similarity, and so that works out very well for all of us. And I know that it's kind of like a rep company.
Shirley,
Yes.
About your role and when you came into it and how you felt about it all in the beginning.
Well, when you hire a press agent, you really don't know what you're hiring because the press agent always has to be at the mercy of the press. So the only way a press agent can sell themselves is to try and look a little bit creative, even though we're not. And one day I received a phone call.
Shirley. Yes, we are.
I received a phone call from Jim Freydberg, whose office is in the same building as mine. And I turned to someone in the office. I said, I wonder why he's calling. And they said, oh, he has a new play. And I said, what is it? And they said, Day Room. I said, Day Room, okay, what's it about? They said, it's about this hospital and this and that. I said, good. Pete Sanders, who at that time had, I guess, broken his ankle, was on crutches. I said, give me your crutches. So I go up in the elevator, and I walk in with my crutches in the office, and Jim looks at me strangely. And they start saying, we have this play, it's called Burn This. I said, oh, I have the title wrong. I thought it was Day Room. He said, Day Room, what do you mean? That's another...
asking you why you had crutches.
Yeah, I said, and I couldn't understand. I wasn't getting any reaction from him. And I'm talking about a play that deals with a hospital, and he's talking about a play called Burn This. And finally, we all got straightened out that I auditioned for the wrong play. And that's when I became involved.
I was actually looking for a press agent who was severely injured at the time.
How long have you been together? Since we were talking about establishing records.
We met on a television interview show similar to this.
Financial News.
6 years ago.
I was doing workshopping. I'd finished two workshops of a show called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down. And I was in I loved the show, and I was in a situation where all my partners had disappeared. and Jim was on the show for Baby, and I started carrying on about how much I liked Three Guys, and then that's how we met. And then Jim replaced.
I unfortunately went to see it.
Unfortunately, he went to see it.
Actually, the show was wonderful, but people didn't come.
But you are now partners as producers.
Yeah.
Did you finally produce Three Guys?
Yes.
It was
Yes, we
marvelous.
did.
I just adored it.
Well, you were one. Actually, a lot of people adored it, but not enough. I think of the things we've done together, it's one of the things that we've been most pleased about.
Do you have separate functions, one money and one creative?
Well, it works a little differently. I had a general management firm as well, so we general manage our own shows. We also have a film company, so we also do most of our own, a lot of our own advertising work as well. The commercial for Burn This was produced by our own company. Max handles more of the dealing with people that join in with us and participate. I handle more of the business end and dealing with the director and the writer and all of that end of it. but we both overlap. He may overlap 25% in my area, and I may overlap 25% in his area. It's a true partnership because where I'm weak, he's very strong, and vice versa. So it works out very, very well. It's been really very satisfying, unusual partnership because it's worked so well.
But I'd like to go back to the Mark Tabor to take us on the road from California, if you would.
There's more before that.
Yes, it goes back further than that, I think. It's
All
quite,
right.
this one was quite an involved project. Before we do that, I wanted to, before we get away from Shirley too much, I just wanted to ask you one question, which we'll come back, I hope, at the end of the road. But as a press agent, when do you read the script? And obviously, you have to be the press agent for a lot of plays you aren't enthusiastic about, probably inside, although you're on the outside. It's part of your job. But you must, it must be interesting to you to get one that you are yourself excited about. Were you excited about this?
It's easier to be excited about a good play, obviously, but when you do get a script and you decide to make that commitment to do it, or they decide to make the commitment to you to hire you, you must believe as a press agent that it's the best script you've ever read. Good, bad, or indifferent, you've got to psych yourself out into that. Otherwise, you can't honestly sell anything. And
when did you read this script?
I read this script just before you went in rehearsal, I suppose, short time before.
That'd be about 2 months ago.
Oh, it's longer than that.
I didn't want her to be really positive what she thought about it until we went into rehearsal.
And can you tell us how you felt about this when you read?
I just thought it was tremendous. I've never read character like Pale in my life. And I couldn't wait till I could see what Marshall was going to do with it. Because he's a blustering, moving, sensitive character, and to get all shades of his characterization, I thought it would be quite a feat.
It must be easier, though, to
it's easier to
sell a script
but you
that
really
like.
have to believe in what you're doing, else you can't really sell it. Because
Let's-
otherwise, when I call Ed Wilson, he says, "Oh, I can't come." You say, "Okay, don't come." You have to believe that he must be there to review the play.
And you convince me of that every time. Let's go back to the beginning now, because after the Saratoga thing, and then I presume it started maybe with that ensemble group you had at Circle, with that grant from the NEA, or perhaps you could describe the stages it went through, because this went through a great many stages, including the Mark Tabor.
Let me briefly take you through that because it is sort of complicated. The first ideas, first writing actually seemed to start at Saratoga Springs, and shortly after that, that was in August, and shortly after that, in October, we went to Dorset. And while we were in Dorset, we were there for 3 weeks, and we did readings of the play as we were going. We came back to New York, and in January of that year, that would be '86 now, we're talking, we did the first reading of the play. Lanford had finished the play, and we read the play as part of our regular Friday readings at Circle Repertory. We're in the process of developing new plays. We read a new play every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock with our company. And this was booked for sometime mid-January, and we read it.
I finished it about the 22nd of December.
Right.
And read it immediately.
Right. It was early in January, I know, because I had to go to California. So our first cast was, actually, when Lanford was writing the play, and we were uncertain as to what this character Pale actually was going to end up, how he was going to be incarnated, actually. And one of our things in Dorset, we had a black actor, a very good black actor named James McDaniel, read it, and we had an Irish actor, Bruce McCarty, was reading it, just as, in the process. But as he was writing it, I said to Lanford at one point, "You know who I think he had just worked the year before with Malkovich on Balm and Gilead, and I said, I think Malkovich would be wonderful for this part. And Lanford said, "Well, that's not what I've been imagining, but yes, you're right." And I think at that point he started writing it for Malkovich. This was in the middle of the first act.
From then, I said, I ran into Malkovich, and when we were going to see Aunt Dan and Lemon and in the lobby, and said, "I think I'm writing a play for you. I said, I think I'm glad.
So when we got our first reading together, Lanford had written the role of the dancer for Nancy Snyder, who was a member of our Circle Rep company, had done Angels Fall with us and Knock Knock. And the other people we just got together for the reading were John Malkovich and Jonathan Hogan and Lou Liberatore, because they were members of the company and they happened to be, you know, available and easy and right for the parts, sort of. And so we didn't think this was final casting, but as it turned out, it was pretty close to it, because Nancy, as it turned out, was pregnant and was going to have her baby very near to the time that we were expecting to do production, and so she decided that she wouldn't be able to do it. And so our first reading was in January. I then went to California, where I was doing a picnic at the Amundsen. And in the course of doing picnic, Gordon Davidson, who's a friend, and you know, we'd worked with the Mark Taper many, many times, came waltzing by the rehearsal and said, "Hi, what's up? What are you doing outside of picnic?" And I said, "Well, Lanford's written a new play." And he said, "Oh, that's very exciting. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, we really feel like we would like to do it somewhere before we do it in New York." And he said, "Would you like to do it here?" And I said, "I'm glad you asked that question," because that was sort of what we were thinking, that maybe we could. So he said, "Well, let me read it at once. I'm very eager." So I gave him a copy of the script, and he read it, and we started making plans at that point to do a co-production between Circle Rep and the Mark Taper Forum. We had worked there 5 times before, but always creating the play first at Circle Rep and then taking it to the Taper later. So this was going to be the first time that we reversed that process and actually did the creating with the facilities of the Mark Taper Forum. It's a wonderful, wonderful theater, one of the great theaters.
So that was the basic co-production, really?
Yes, it was a Circle Rep production with the Mark Taper Forum support and facilities, and it was a co-production. So he suggested that at that point that we do it there, and Lanford and I both thought it was a great idea, and we started making plans to do it there. And just at this point, we discovered that Nancy Snyder couldn't do the play, and Gordon was also helpful in terms of Lanford had worked with Joan Allen once on Three Sisters, and she was on my list of people who possibly could play Anna. And as a matter of fact, she's the only one I ever mentioned to Gordon. I said, "Well, we were sort of thinking maybe of Joan Allen." He said, "I'll get her here immediately." And he flew her in, and she did a reading for us at the Taper with Lou Liberatore, which Lanford didn't see, during the run of Picnic. And I was running back and forth across the street because I was giving notes on Picnic that night as well. So I was going back and forth. So that was in February, basically, that we did the Taper arrangement. And in June, I came back for a National Endowment meeting of some kind, and Jim got us together, Lanford and I, and Tanya Berezin, who has now replaced me as artistic director at Circle Rep, and we all went into Suzanne Sato's office, who was the managing director, and Jim outlined a plan of producing the play. Now, this is very premature, you understand, on Broadway, before we had even, you know, done it. We'd had one reading.
Unusual.
But he
Naming the theater, too.
Yeah, that's right, he did.
I'll tell you something about that. When I play the play, I also picture where it should play. And a very strange thing happened while this whole Joan Allen thing was going on. I flew out to Steppenwolf to see a production of A Lesson from Aloes that was done out there, of Athol's play, and she was in it, and it was the most extraordinary performance. I couldn't believe how brilliant she was. I came back, and at a board meeting, I happened to say, "What about Joan Allen?" Just kind of casually, but they had already, the process of that had already been happening. And it was like, you know how sometimes the puzzle just all kind of fits together. Even an incident last night on an understudy thing came up, and Lanford had said something to Marshall, and Marshall said to me, "I had just 10 minutes earlier been talking about that same person." It's like...
That's real serendipity.
Yeah, it's when you're on the right wavelength, that I think that's what, in a way, often creates hit shows, is that process where everybody is kind of have the same goal, and they don't even have to say more. They can say half a sentence, and it's like a full page to each other. And that's what was going on.
What was the plan that you outlined when you got together? This was after the Taper production.
No, it was before.
Before,
it was
even
June,
before,
yeah.
over before the
Taper production wasn't until the following February.
I see. So was that all part of the master plan then, or?
Yes. Well, we had in mind that we had made the arrangement with the taper, and we were going to do it there first. And we'd also, of course, Circle Rep had announced the play in our 18th season, I guess it was, for Circle Rep. We were going to do it there. And so our plan was to do it at the taper and then bring it to Circle Rep, and then Jim, assuming that it was successful, was going to move it right to Broadway at that point.
I took us to Michael Bennett's studio.
Right,
Theater, remember?
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That was the
But our problem was that we discovered that John Malkovich had made a commitment to some guy named Spielberg to do a film, and he was going to be unavailable for quite a long time, and we weren't. We said, well, can you give us any time at all? He said, well, I think I have time to do the LA engagement, but not the New York engagement. And we said, oh my God, what is our subscribers going to kill us? And now we were sort of tied into this. We couldn't get out of it. And so we determined that we kept thinking, well, sometimes film delay, you know, their schedules. So let's go ahead and make plans to bring it to New York. And Jim took us down to the 890 Broadway at Michael Bennett's studio, where the theater seats twice as many as we did at Circle Rep. And so we knew that we had a very limited time, and we said if we have a theater twice as large, we can get them all in, and all the subscribers in 3 weeks. And so our plan was to do that, hoping that we would get John Malkovich for 3 weeks longer than he expected to be. We actually ended up getting him one week longer. So we did the play at the taper. We went into rehearsal in, gosh, when was it? December. And we opened there early in January of 1987. We played there for 4 weeks or 5.
Played there for 3 hours and 45 minutes.
It's very short. Right, that's true.
What was this say that
He said we played there for 3 hours and 45 minutes, which is the first performance.
Was that
quite
only
long.
a subscription audience?
Yes, a subscription audience.
Just your subscription.
Well, as it turned out, it became the hottest ticket ever at the
I
paper.
know. Yeah.
They were scalping tickets for $100 a piece outside. And it was a big, enormous success
That's how
in
Jim
California.
financed the show.
Right.
That's what I wanted to get to, is how you the finances.
You know,
of the
talk
show.
about a collaboration, because during that time, when we came up with Michael Bennett's studio, and Max was the chairman of Circle Rep, with people there, came up with an idea of doing a benefit to eliminate a large percentage of Circle Rep's deficit, and so we did a benefit performance for a very high price and raised $100,000, which eliminated $100,000 of a very large accumulated deficit, and began to put Circle Reps back into good financial shape. And that's a whole collaboration of ideas of how can we help the theater that developed, that this man started and this man started, that developed this great author, and at the same time also begin to have people come in and see that this could be a commercial play. One of the things that I noticed was in my first reading is that it was a very big play. I kept saying, this is a big play, and people would say to me, no, it's an off-Broadway play. I said, no, this is a big play. It's written like a big symphony. And that's why I kept seeing it in a big space. And I had problems with it when it was in the small space. But when it came to Broadway and I saw it, I remember you and I standing on the stage and looking at each other, this is what we were dreaming and talking about.
It belongs there.
It belonged there, and you could see that that's where it all had to happen.
When you say that it was 3 hours, and was this because it ran long or because it needed cutting?
It was our first performance. I think we were probably slow. It wasn't even a first performance. It was a dress rehearsal, and we had 750 people packed in the taper, all invited to this dress rehearsal. And we weren't really ready to perform. They were seeing our work in a very rough shape. But the reason the play ran so long is because the response of the audience, which was such a surprise to us, they wouldn't let us go on. I mean, almost every line had such an enormous response. And I was very upset. I said, it's not that funny. This is a serious play. But they laughed at everything long and hard, and it just went on forever. We have seen that happen, by the way, again. The play actually runs 2 hours and 34 minutes. That's not 3 hours. No matter what you read in the paper, it's 2 hours and 34 minutes long. However, with an audience on certain responsive nights, we'll easily add 12 minutes to that, because the audience will laugh so much that the actors cannot go on. So on what I consider a good performance, where the audience is polite and nice and sweet, we can make it in 2:34. But on a raucous night, no.
I must have been on a raucous night.
Yeah, it was long. Anyway, let me pick up the thread again quickly, just to finish it up, because Malkovich was going to be gone for 7 months, so we had to play Circle Rep only in 3 fast weeks to get in our subscribers. And we determined at that point that we would get back together after Malkovich was finished with his film, and that was going to be in July. He would be finished. And so actually, somewhere along the way, when we were in rehearsal at the Taper originally, I had a call from Jeff Perry at the Steppenwolf Company, who, of course, had nurtured John and Joan Allen through all their development, or they had nurtured the theater, I'm not sure which, equally, symbiosis. Anyway, he had said, if at any point Steppenwolf could be of help along the way, we'd love to join you. And I said, okay, well, that may come up. As it happened, it did come up. And so when it was apparent that we were going to have to wait for John, we needed a chance to get the theater, the play back together before we brought it to New York. And so we made the arrangement with Steppenwolf to do the play for a month in Chicago at a beautiful new theater there called the Royal George Theater. And it's really a spectacular new theater there, about 500 seats. And it just was a perfect opportunity for us. We came back into rehearsal in August, basically. We rehearsed for what, it was just 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks.
2 weeks that we, putting it back together, but it was 2 good weeks. And then we played in Chicago for a month, and then we came directly to New York. We closed in Chicago on a Sunday night, as a matter of fact, at what would be midnight New York time. And the actors traveled the next day, and we had a rehearsal that evening. And the following evening at 8 o'clock New York time, we had an invited dress that a great many people, it was a full house, a great many Circle Rep subscribers and so forth had come to see it as a result of Jim's invitation to them. And so we played our first performance in New York 44 hours after we closed in Chicago.
Extraordinary.
We had 2 sets. We had a set in Chicago, and we had a New York set that was partial pieces of the LA set, rebuilt. I'll tell you something about going to Chicago. We worked out an arrangement which would benefit that nonprofit theater. They held a big benefit. They played in a theater that was 3 times the normal size theater that they would play in. We helped them by doing press and a lot of stuff, and they pre-sold the whole thing before we ever arrived.
Sold out, yeah.
So, and in the same process of helping them out financially, and earlier through Max's idea of helping out Circle Rep, we saved $82,000 in pre-production costs on this production that we put into our advertising budget.
That's wonderful.
So that there was a whole process of a plan of how we were going to do this.
Can we
and it
go
worked
into
out.
that, the financial end of it, of how you saved it? Where did you save it from? By having an audience there?
Well, because by putting them under contract to that other theater and them rehearsing there, and them, they were not on our payroll. We didn't have to pay rehearsal costs. We didn't have to pay for space, but a very small amount of money. We were not involved in any of that stuff that took place. But we did not take a royalty as the holders of the option at that time. We did not take any benefit personally at all for our production of Chicago. We let them take all of it. And in turn, it was the normal cost that they would have to mount a show, which saved us that much money, and that's a lot of money to save.
And Malkovich is such a large draw in Chicago,
As is Joan.
as is Joan, that they figured probably 1/3 of their subscribers had subscribed because that was on their show, so they were very happy.
They increased their subscription this season larger than it had ever been, primarily because this was on there. And John and Joan hadn't been seen in a while in Chicago.
Is there any way of transferring your Circle Rep subscriptions people to the theater today, the Broadway theater that you're at now? Does that ever happen?
Well, they've already seen it, of course. They saw
Not
it
all
last,
of them. Have
all
they?
our subscribers saw it
They have all-
last February. We got them all in that 3-week time. We have between 5,000 and 6,000 subscribers. But as I said, at the dress rehearsal, Jim invited all the contributors to Circle Rep to come and really join us in the celebration of opening the play on Broadway.
Go ahead, Shirley.
There was another great savings in Chicago because Jim decided to do the TV commercial out there.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we did. We made the television commercial out there, and I will tell you something else we did. Instead of being in that position of opening a show and wondering what the reviews were going to be, and under panic deciding, oh, we'll make a TV commercial, we'll do an ad, we'll do this. We did it all out there, and we bought $100 and some odd thousand of television time 6 weeks before the show ever came to New York that started the morning that the reviews came out. In other words, we bought prime time, not last second where we could only get any old time. We bought it we've already bought our time all the way through into December now. And we've bought more, in other words, since then. So that the only decision, and we also bought page 3 of the Sunday Times for the opening, the only decision that we had to make the day after the opening of the show is which quotes we were going to use in the ad. It wasn't anything else but that. The commercial was already on. The morning we met at 11 o'clock, it had been on 8 times that morning already.
I just happen to have a copy.
We have several.
I'll be carrying that.
I'm going to send it out as a Christmas card. This is this coming Sunday's New York Times. And the full-page ad here is quite lovely. You can probably read this all the way back there, can't you?
Hold it up.
We were very lucky also in that the next page has a half-page review, very favorable review by Mel Gussell. So it was a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
I'm going to forgive him for putting that newspaper in front of my face like that. There's one other thing I will add that we did out there. While shooting the commercial, we shot all the television footage that would be used for the reviewers. And it was television footage like you've never seen on a show before. Perfect sound, close-up shots, 3 different scenes. They were all used. And that became, in a sense, another form of advertising of the show. And that's going to be on all the national shows when people are interviewed. And we shot 3 different scenes. One
Was it cheaper to make your commercial in Chicago than it would have been in New York?
Because it was a non-union house? Yes, it was. And we could do it on what is the set? Yes, quite a bit. Now, I'm not saying anything. Somebody just went.
No.
I'm not saying anything against unions at all. We pay every union what they're supposed to get at that theater, and we even pay musicians who aren't even there. So let's not hiss at all. But when you have the opportunity to save some money, and you're legally in a place that happens not to be a union place, then you should have the right to do that.
Well, I think that's one of the values of having a general manager at the helm who knows these things and has been in productions before. I think a lot of the errors in producing today and the high cost is having people come in that do not know either shortcuts or where it's available to get the very best value for your money.
And lack of planning, too, Isabel.
That's the important.
When Jim was talking about seeing all this in advance, I mean, to make the TV commercial before the play has even opened in New York is a remarkable piece of foresight, I think.
And also to make a commercial for a play.
Yeah.
That in itself is a feat.
I should say a little something about that because it happens to do with the Tony Awards that made me do that commercial. Last year on the Tony Awards, I noticed that they put the plays, scenes from the plays, on the Tony Awards. And when I saw the scene from Fences, I was just shocked by it. I said, oh my God, you really can advertise plays on television. Because what people have been doing is they never show us, they show a scene from a musical, but from a play they never do. And so I said, you know, I think we should create a commercial that's based similar to what that scene was, a moment, certain moments from the show. And that is what the commercial is. It has 4 different moments from 4 different individuals that different groups of people could identify with. And it's directly from the show. It is not a commercial that has quotes all over it or anything.
Has it started running yet?
Yeah, it's been running since the day after we opened.
The other...
And then it spins off into 10-second ones of each one of those. Because I also realized at the time that we were about to open at the most expensive time to buy television. It's moving into Thanksgiving to Christmas. So how can I solve that? 10-second commercials cost 50% of 30-second commercials. And since commercial prices are 4 times higher during that period, I could buy 10-second times. I would establish it with the 30-second commercial for the first 2 weeks, and then we'd switch to the 10 during that very expensive time. And that's what we're doing.
The expensive time isn't even available. This time was all bought months ago.
Months ago. If we had tried to buy it now, we wouldn't get it.
We
Is
wouldn't
there a
get it.
different budget for advertising, for media advertising, which is yours, Shirley, and for the television commercials?
Is it a different
into
budget,
your-
did you say?
Is there a difference in your budget,
Well, we both work together with the
both
with
for
an
the
agency on
advertising and for the commercials?
commercial.
As well.
This particular production represents something that's happening more and more, and you've been obviously involved in it, and Marshall's been involved in it, which is this close collaboration with the commercial theater, the profit theater, and the not-for-profit theater, which has been happening increasingly because obviously the commercial theater has not been developing plays on its own to come into Broadway. The vast majority of them for the last 5, 6, 8 years have really come from the regional or the not-for-profit theater here in New York. And one of the questions I'd like to ask, Max, because Jim described how the arrangement was with Steppenwolf in terms of you're saving money on the one hand and they're getting benefits. But you must have made a prior arrangement, and you must have one now, with both the Mark Table and the Circle Rep in terms of sharing profits or something.
Well, because of, obviously because of our relationship with Circle Rep, I mean, both being on the board, and we wanted to do the play, and we also wanted to help Circle Rep. So the two of us, as part of our arrangement, is we've given our profits from the New York run to Circle Rep to reduce their deficit. I mean, speaking as a
hope
commercial.
not all of your profits.
Yes,
all
of them.
Really?
But
Would you
that's
like to repeat that? I think that's very important.
well. That's because we believe, we really believe that this play was nurtured by Circle Rep, and that our responsibilities too are to see that this company, I mean, both of us being board members, to see that this company continues. And it does have a problem. We're very anxious to reduce its debt, and we felt this was the right thing to do because it's not, it isn't ethical really for two board members to sort of snatch plays away from an organization of which we're on the board of, and then profit from it. I mean, it's just not.
It would be a tricky ethical.
Well, it's not ethical at all.
Yes.
It's not even tricky. It's just unethical.
It's just plain.
Of course, we may both resign from the board.
So that was really, one thing I would like to add that I think is important when you talk about this transfer from regional. There are two ways to do it. I mean, what usually happens, to be honest with you, is that people do these shows out in regional theater and then they wait for the stamp of approval from
That's true,
certain
yes.
critics to decide, yes, we're going to move this show because X likes it or Y likes it. And we made it very clear in New York when we were here that there were to be no critics invited and no reviews during the run because we didn't want that to affect our decision that we'd already committed ourselves to do the show, and it really wasn't. It really felt it wasn't fair to the show. So this is another aspect of
I remember the critics were explicitly not invited when it was here for that brief run, and because I had some colleagues who wanted very much to see it, and it was.
Well, the problem.
Shirley would not let them near the door.
No, because the problem.
She proved in that case to be that's a reverse role for you.
I'm very good at
To
that.
keep people away.
Because see, the problem basically is that you could have a play that's it's like Burn This. It was in a certain stage of its development, and then you invite certain critics in, and that ends it, which is really very unfair to everyone involved with it.
The two of us had a very strong discussion about that. We had felt that the life of plays that were developed in New York were being decided by critics, not by creative people. And the future life of a play should be decided by those that are working on it, such as us from the very beginning, all of us. Not on the fact that Frank Rich may come in and say, I don't like it, because then it doesn't seem to have a future life, and a lot of wonderful work has not had a future life because of that. So the object was, no, nobody is to see this except an audience. And it should not be judged because it's still in development. In fact, I had a battle with the Chicago critics about this. They wanted to review the very first performance of the show in Chicago because it was sold out. And I said that was unfair to the author, the director, and the actors. You would have to wait for at least 8 to 12, and I originally said 20 and then we settled on 13 or something like that. But the object was that they had to have the opportunity to see the work that they had done in between the time from New York to Chicago and to see what was working. And it was not to be judged. We weren't there to be judged. We weren't there to get to an opening night. We were there to build a future for the show. And the future was not to stop on a one-day performance and actually disturb that process. So
I like it. Gene is a long-time producer and a wonderful producer. How do you feel about this new development of this working relationship between the not-for-profit and the commercial theater?
I wish that it were happening to me.
On that note, I'm going to have to interrupt because we're going to take a break right now for a question and answer period. But before we do that, there was just a very passing reference made to a very special woman that's in the audience with us today, who has made it possible for a lot of shows to be brought on Broadway as well as off-Broadway, and that's Lucille Lortel. And now, Lucille, please stand up. Thank you for coming. I hope that you've listened very carefully, and I hope that you have your questions ready. We're now going to take a break, and don't go far away, because it's a very short time, and there are so many things to ask these wonderfully talented and knowledgeable people. So thank you for being here. Stand up quickly and sit down quickly.
This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to the American Theatre Wing seminars on working in the theater. These are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. I'm Isabel Stevenson, president of the American Theatre Wing, and this seminar is devoted to the production. We are now going into a question and answer period, and we will hope that all of our questions will be of great interest to you and to our audience. Ed Wilson and Jean Dalrymple are moderators, and I'm going to ask Jean Dalrymple to come up with a question that she's been wanting to ask all through this program. So now, Jean, it's your turn to ask the first question.
I'd like to ask James Freydberg what his idea is of the future of serious plays, since Marshall said Burn This is a serious play, on Broadway.
It's a searing comedy on Broadway. It's very funny. Seriously, it is. I think the future of the business is for producers to begin to work together. We're at an era right now where it costs an enormous amount of money to produce a show. So what a producer has to do is to put a consortium of producers together, which is what Max and I have done on this. Stephen Graham is an independent producer, and I might add an extraordinary independent producer, and he joined us on this. And we have a new producer in the industry who we're developing, Susan Quint-Gallen, who's a terrifically supportive and really exciting person to work with. And so we put those people together for the purpose of producing playwrights. Again, as I said earlier, we're not producing plays. The process that has been disruptive to this industry has been people running around and everybody trying to get the same thing because Frank Rich said he liked it, which is a terrible mistake. The real process should be people looking for great writers and giving them the luxury of knowing when they're writing something that it's going to happen. Not have them be in the position where I wonder if anybody will ever read this. I wonder if it will ever happen. I wonder if it'll ever get mounted. And if producers can begin to work together that way and build up a support to writers, and different groups of them begin to hatch and begin to happen, we will see more than just 31 shows on Broadway, which is what we've been seeing on an average lately. We'll go back to the era where we saw 80 and 100 and 200, and there was an era like that. So what I'm really saying is that we want to go back to the way it used to be done, not the way it has been done. And I think that that's the future. And I think as that begins to happen, we will have a stronger theater.
Does that mean that there should be more companies like Circle Rep, like Playwrights Horizon, like development companies?
It's helpful if there is. The other thing is that I think all of us have to begin to realize that we've got, everybody keeps saying this one critic is too powerful. Well, we as producers have made him powerful. We keep quoting him. We keep saying he's the most important person. We keep opening shows with no reserve, saying if we get Frank Rich, we have a hit. If we don't, we close it.
Jim, it's
But
not...
what we really should be doing is actually opening shows with a strong reserve. I don't know of anybody who would ever open up a restaurant and serve one meal to Frank Rich and close the restaurant.
Good point.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, it's not Frank Rich as a person. It's the paper.
Times.
It's the Times, so it's
It's
saying
the
the same
paper.
thing.
It's been
It's not him
proven.
as a person. It's saying
So-
the same thing.
No.
But Frank
would you like
is
Our first
tomorrow,
question
right
from the audience.
for, I don't know, some weekly, he'll have no power.
Yeah, it is the Times. It's a good
What
point.
would you like?
I'm Carol McGee, and I have a question for Mr. Freydberg and Mr. Weitzenhoffer. What advice would you give to aspiring producers as to how to break into that aspect of the business?
Want to take a crack at that, Max?
He handles aspiring producers.
Well,
You
that-
handle board members.
I mean, we've had, Jim and I have had a number of partners who have gone from aspiring producers on to becoming, working on their own, either that or disappearing forever. But I think mainly, an aspiring producer really has to go out and go to as many things as possible. Not Broadway, but all of these things that go on in New York, like at Circle Rep or Playwrights Horizon or what's being done, there's so many things being done in town or regionally, and find out what they like and what they want, and then if they really believe in something, believe in it, then if they basically don't have the tools initially to produce, which I don't think anyone does when they start, then you have to find yourself a very, very good partner or a general manager or someone, and go to somebody like Jim who has general managing skills and say, I really want to do this show, and what do I do? Don't be afraid to say I don't know, because none of us know, you know.
I think the best way for a producer, a person who aspires to be a producer, is to go work for a regional theater, as I did, and work your way up. Pull the curtain, sweep the floor, learn every aspect of the theater. Because the whole key to producing is to know your business. And there are too many people who say, I'm a producer because I bought an option to a property. But they never actually know what that means. And then they turn around and they give the responsibility of all of that to other people to do, like a general manager and so on. And they really don't know what is really happening because they haven't been at the bottom of the ladder working their way up and learning the business.
I think that's
So
possibly
I think
the most
learning
important
business.
thing that's been said here, and that is to learn your craft and just do anything, but find out what makes everything work before you ask somebody to do it. And that's the important
We
thing
both,
we've
Max
learned
and I
here.
both worked in nonprofit theaters individually.
That's the important.
It's where we learned the business.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see a familiar face. This
My
man
question
knows
is
his
addressed
craft.
to Shirley Herz and to Jim Freydberg.
I told you he was going to sing us.
Yeah, I know, that's right.
Do you think that television commercials for dramatic plays can be effective in bringing an audience to the theater?
I never did. I do now. We are doing 3 plays this season, and every one of them will have a television commercial. And that was Bob Camelot, who was the general manager of Fences. And interestingly enough, it was his show on the Tony Awards, as I said earlier, that convinced me that you really could sell theater through a television commercial. We sell musicals that way, then we must be able to sell a play that way. Now, sometimes you even have a musical that you can't sell by showing it. Sometimes it's better to interview the audience and let them tell. But the fact is, I think on most plays, if you start to really look at the script and really go through it on a basis of how can I present this in 30 seconds so it will entice people to come and see it, yes, I think if you can find that within a play, like we did within this one, and I will tell you that on this play, so far, there's no question that the television commercial has begun to build an audience for us because we have seen that when it's on, we seem to be doing more business than when it's not on. So we know that it's had an effect. And since the reviews have just come out, we know that they haven't had the impact that we know they will have as all the weeklies that are so wonderful and all that come out. So we know the
But
TV
you can
commercials
track the
have.
commercials by
Yeah.
the telephone calls
Yeah.
after they run. However, I'm curious that Bob asked the question. I'm curious how he feels about it as a producer. And
I asked the question because I'm ambivalent. We don't have a commercial defenses. We're thinking about it. My belief is that if you excerpt material from the straight play, you may do it a disservice. The scene that you saw on the Tonys was 2 minutes long and was a complete scene. It was impossible to do that as a television commercial.
We'd be glad to look at your show and help you with that. Our company, which did our commercial, would be glad to look at your show, go over the script, and within 5 days we will try to come back with something that might work for you.
however, I must say that up until this time, I have never worked on a production of a straight play that commercial has worked. This time we know for sure
Well,
it's working.
I have a success story to tell you because I know that they work
right.
if you have the right one. Because Jim and I opened on Broadway in May, and we did no business at all for about the first 4 months. I mean, you know, we couldn't give tickets away. And we made that commercial, and the show turned into a hit, became the 4th longest running play in the history of the Broadway theater. The commercial did it.
Which
totally.
show are you talking
Gemini.
Gemini.
Not only that, the
You'll all
commercial won a
remember,
big
I'm not
award.
hungry, I'll just pick.
Yeah.
It got down to that 10-second, I'm not hungry, I'll just pick.
Pick.
And the show took off like crazy. From
And another, go
Yeah, I'm
ahead.
sorry.
I was going to say another interesting thing is not the amount of money that you spend on a commercial that matters, Because the last time I was on this panel was for Lacage, and I think we either had just about or we were going to do this big $250,000 commercial to replace a $15,000 one that we had done for an out-of-town run prior to Broadway, which we then started using in New York. And we keep, to this day, keep going back to that $15,000 commercial because it works better than the $250,000 one. So money is not the essential thing in making a commercial.
I think
Helps.
Bob's question is good, though, because what I said earlier was that producers will present segments of a show on a musical, but they're afraid to do it on a play. And in reality, what they do on a play is a bunch of quotes if they do a TV commercial. The fact is that you sell Camel cigarettes the same way you sell parliaments. You sell a musical the same way you sell a play. And you see what is working. And if you have a play where you can take out moments of it, then you use that. If you have a play where you can't, then maybe you use the audience telling people that it's wonderful. But you come up with a way, because it's part of the process. Once a play has opened, 85% of producing is marketing. And that's the key.
That's the
The other
important thing
15%
today.
is to make sure everybody else is doing their job right. But 85% of it is marketing, and that's where this comes
That's the
from.
next question.
Hi, my name is Dennis Stain, and my question is to James Freydberg. I'm one of those producers who's working his way up from the bottom. And I produced a play called What About Love as an equity-approved showcase this summer that was very successful at the River West Theater. And I'm ready to move it to a mini contract, and I produced the showcase for 10 grand. And I'd like to go now to a mini contract. It has 6 characters, and I need to know basically how much money do I need to raise.
Do you want to explain what a mini contract is?
Well, a mini contract would be an off-Broadway house that would seat about 100.
Pays the actors about 100.
Well, the audience seats is 100 seats.
Yeah, but the equity
There's 6
scale-
characters in the play.
How much do you have to pay the actors?
A mini contract would be $160 a week.
That's what I thought, yeah.
On a 99-seat house.
Well, it happens to be one of the most difficult things to do, because this may sound very peculiar, but it's easier to raise $1 million than $25,000.
I like that. That sounds pretty good.
So you're really trying to do the most difficult thing of all. And it would be somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 to maybe $50,000, depending on what you're going to do. I'd have to see what the play is. I don't know what it is.
I'll send you a copy.
But it is much easier to raise money for Broadway than off-Broadway, because there's a glamour about it, and off-Broadway doesn't give the investor the visibility that they're looking for and the glamour of it. So whenever I go and see a production like what you're talking about, I always have tremendous respect that it ever got on. It's much tougher to get them on. You know?
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Al Yanawali from New Jersey, and my question is directed to Lanford Wilson. Why is Anna Mann the only character with a surname in your play, Mr. Wilson?
You would ask that. It's a mistake.
Several critics came up with absolutely wonderful answers to that, and it was really marvelous. What that is a typographical error. And they all had last names for a while, and I decided I didn't like them half their names, and Anna's last name was not even mine. That was Larry's last name or something like that. It got screwed around, and in the Chicago program, suddenly there's Anna Mann and the other 4 characters, and we went, oh, that's unfortunate. Never crossed my mind that no one would take care of it, and it would appear in the New York program.
Thank you.
It'll be out next week.
Thank you.
Yes.
Take care of your cold.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Leo. I'd like to address this to Jim Freydberg. Jim, your attention to the creative process is quite inspiring to many of us. How do you see a future I can't read the handwriting. How do you see a future of bringing creative theater to low and middle-income audiences who so need this kind of exposure?
Well, I think we are. There's what are there, 89 lower theaters? There's hundreds of regional theaters. I think we are. You know, people keep saying, well, somebody announced they're going to do this and they're going to form a national theater. We have a national theater. It just happens to be in many theaters. And we're not a small island off of Ireland. We're a big, large country, and we happen to have theaters all over the place. I was in Arizona, there's a theater there. I was in Alaska, there's a theater there. I was in Wyoming, there's a theater there. So, it's already happening.
It's happening.
And it's quite nice that it is. Yeah.
He was asking about economically, I think.
From a producer standpoint.
Broadway is so expensive. What about people who can't afford to go, I think? Is that what you were basically
Well, I think the people that can't afford to go, I think it's a very complicated problem. Yes, prices are too high. Now, in this show, I've been noticing that Broadway plays have been running $40 to $42.50. This show has a top of $37.50. That doesn't mean that that's a great price. I still think that's too high. But I think gradually, as we begin to, as producers, begin to stop letting the theater owner constantly be the one who negotiates for us in union negotiations, and we begin to take into account the independent producer's needs, that will begin to happen, and that is beginning to happen now.
Can I ask a question there? Is that beginning to happen? And if you had your druthers, I seem to ask this at every one of these seminars, the production seminars, would you reduce the price of the ticket, and could you?
Well, I think it's very difficult to, and I think that we would if we could. You know, when I said something about the independent producer leaving the responsibility of negotiating to the theater owner, actually the theater owner has done a terrific job in these negotiations. The problem is that independent producers, up until now, have been individual entrepreneurs and have not worked together to solve the problem. But gradually, as people like Max and myself get together and other people, they begin to form groups, and gradually this will begin to change. The ticket price will not go down until that begins to happen, and I think we'll see that go down over the next few years, or at least stabilize itself.
Yeah, I think if I... Oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think what's terribly important to answer the question is that producers do become conscious of ticket prices, as Jim and Max have. I think it's wonderful you have a $37.50 top, even though that's a small victory in a way, but I think it's a very important one, because I must tell you there are theater owners particularly, and some producers who really are not concerned with price. They may say so, but I know that they're not. And I have to say one other thing that I think is worth being aware of, which is that as bad as the situation is, and it is, and we need to pay attention to it the way Jim and Max are, there are people who do have access through the Theater Development Fund, which happens to be something I'm involved in, and to put on another hat for just a moment, the half-price ticket booth in Times Square does let people go who could not afford, and we also have a mailing list of people who are definitely low-income people, retired people, people in schools, people who work for hospitals and so forth. And we have over 90,000 people in this area who are on our mailing list and who go on mail subscriptions, and their prices are very low to go to the theater. They are even less than the half price. So there is a segment of the population that does get to go, but we need to increase that dramatically.
During our preview period, we did sell 6,000 tickets through TDF at $11.50. And that was how we gained a strong audience during that period as well, because we were an unknown show.
Do you have a balcony?
Yes, we have a balcony, and that was through the Theater Development Fund, and I might add on something like that, we lost money doing that, but we also gained an audience and gained a recognition for the show, and so that was an advertising cost as far as I was concerned. And a word of mouth.
Absolutely.
Next question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Thomas Walsh from Backstage. This is for the record, just so you'll know. Can you envision, for Mr. Mason specifically, can you envision a process the way you did, where most important plays, quote unquote, can close the doors to the critics prior to opening the run, if not during the run, to somehow nullify that negative power that can, as you said, close it in a day as one meal in a restaurant type of thing? And is that kind of thing feasible, do you think, in theater today?
I would like to see it become feasible. I don't know that it really is. We need the cooperation, really, of the entire theater community, and that includes the critics as well, to recognize the difficulty of the process. We're engaged in an art form, theoretically. But this art form in this country has deeply commercial roots. Our theater is rooted in capitalism. And that's a wonderful thing because it gives us a wonderful free theater, but I mean free in terms of ideas and expression. but very expensive in terms of the need for the public, basically, to support the enterprise with their ticket sales, or buys, I should say. We don't have a government-supported system as most of the other major countries of the world do. Our government support is so terribly minimal. And therefore, we are in a consumer business. And it's really difficult. The role of the critic has become the role of a consumer advocate or advisor. And how we get back on the track of the proper relationship of an artistic form to its marketing, which is what Jim is talking about, really requires the cooperation of the entire theater community. In this case, where we had lost the actor for a period of months, and John Malkovich was only going to play the first week, it was very clear, and the critics were very understanding and sympathetic to the fact that if they came and reviewed the play with Malkovich, he was going to be gone, and so it wouldn't be fair to the public. So in this case, they were very cooperative and helpful. I know of several regional theaters and not-for-profit theaters that really have invited critics only in the last week or so of a run, and I think that's terrific. We have put our opening back at Circle Rep, I think, now to we're opening in the middle of the second week rather than in the middle of the first week, which is what we used to do. So we're delaying the process. But there should be a greater dialogue among all the people involved in the theater, and there needs to be cooperation from everyone to come up with a plan that would allow the creative process greater flexibility.
I think that dialogue is important. I think that's what is important.
Can I just add one thing about that to me is very disturbing when you talk about the critics? You know, we sit here and say to ourselves, well, my goodness, if we lose the Times, the game is over. But really, the problem is it's the audience's perception of the Times. You see, we wouldn't have that problem if the general theater-going public didn't feel that if the Times didn't give it its blessing, it was over. I mean, people really should go to the theater because they love it and then make up their own mind. I mean, if if the Times gives a movie a bad review, it doesn't leave town.
They often don't have the chance to make up their own mind.
You know, but that's a part of the perception. They read the Times and then they say, "Oh my God, this is I don't want to see that."
Yes,
you know?
for Max, they can go to a movie that gets a bad review for $7.
Yeah,
that's a very valid point. The problem is price, because what the price has eliminated is good and very good, and what it's only accepting is spectacular. And that is a real problem, because in our society, it shouldn't be that way. And maybe if the prices were lower, the critic would be looking at it in a much different way. But he has to be looking at $42.50 for this. This is worth $25. So it's a whole complicated problem.
In this dialogue that could take place, would there be a suggestion that the next day need not be the only time for the review, that they could wait a few days for a review?
Well, as long as it doesn't move backwards. The problem was Frank Richards came to see a play called Passion that I directed, and he saw 6 performances before our opening, and his review was that we were under-rehearsed. I didn't mind that because it was true at the time he saw it, but he repeated it in the next Sunday Times for about four different reviews that he wrote on the play. Every time he said it was under-rehearsed, he never came back to see it. I was outraged that it moved that direction.
It's very serious. Would you like to think?
I'm Joan Ungaro, a low-income member of TDF as a theater person, and my question is from Max. I think the producers are getting all the questions today, but my question, aside from liking the idea of a producers' union, which just cropped up in my head after hearing you and Jim talk, how do you educate the people who give you money to give it to the artists to do the theater work? So how do you educate a backer, for instance?
You don't give them those scripts.
Well, that's a very. You have to understand that the nature of raising money has changed radically. First of all, you have to accept the idea that we're not like we were in the movie The Producers. I mean, you know, and I mean, years ago when I've been raising money and producing shows for over 10 years now on Broadway, and I mean, years ago you used to do it with 6,000 lunches with ladies, friends, whatever, and you just tell everybody, well, we're going to do this play, it's going to cost in those days, $200,000, why don't you give me $2,000? And it was never, I mean, it was all sort of a thing you talk to your friends and everyone and let's just do it. I think the problem now is that the shows are, of course, the shows are very, very expensive. You cannot produce a show any longer with 500 investors or 300 investors. So it's really just either putting together a group of, like we've done, of people that we know that are interested in doing plays, and then you know, talking to your friends who, or interested parties, because there's not that many people around anymore that are interested in investing in the theater, and really, you know, and really just talking to them about the process and making the whole thing very interesting and making them interested in the project, not just saying, oh, you can come to opening night and go to a party and that's it. And you really have to involve
At this point, I really have to interrupt, and I feel so badly, but we haven't any more time. And I have to tell you that this is the American Theatre Wing Seminar on Working in the Theatre, and it's coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And this is just one of the programs of the American Theatre Wing. We have been listening to the entire production team of Burn This, a wonderfully exciting show that's on Broadway at this moment. And there's more and more and more questions to be asked of these talented and knowledgeable people that have come up here and given their time and their health to be with us this morning. And I'm deeply grateful to you, and I'm grateful to our co-moderators, Jean Dalrymple and Ed Wilson. Thank you very much for being with us.